Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to In the Gallery with Laura Ali. I am your host, Laura Ali. So we're back in here. We are going to finish up Nancy Brophy. That's it. That's it. I'm gonna get into Nancy and then that's it. I love Nancy though. Well, I don't love her, but I think you guys know what I mean. Like, I'm never done with Nancy Brophy. Like, I will probably end up watching it again, like, next month. I probably watch it once a month just for like, pure entertainment value in watching her squirm. So, that's gonna be my plan. But so we're gonna finish up the last little bit of her cross-examination, and then, we're gonna get into something completely new because James Crumbly's wrapped up for the most part until sentencing, and then Nancy Brophy will be wrapped up. So let's see what's next. I'm not gonna say, but it will be here pretty soon. Let's say. Okay, so let's get into it. Um, as you guys know, I definitely am um a new a new streamer or new recorder of podcasts. So I'm trying to do this like transition thing. So let's see if this works cuz I am a technology master, guys. Okay, let's see. All right, we're in here. All right, so let's see if this works on the play. And I'm going to mute so we don't have that echo. All right.
With that text thread,
Susan, yeah.
it's 212.4. 212.4.
Oh, I would like to show the court right now Defense Exhibit 212.4,
Okay.
which is a text from Dan Brophy to Nancy Brophy, asking her whether she's
Oh, sorry guys. I meant to quickly say um I think we're starting at 152. I think I'm a little bit ahead. This is like them just doing some housekeeping stuff, so I'm gonna skip ahead on this. So just bear with me one second here.
Susan's room I think, with abandon. Counsel had asked Ms. Brophy.
It by itself, I don't know if it's a statement really of anything. I don't even know if one could even understand what it means.
Area that you hadn't.
I can't see it.
Okay, guys, we're gonna get back into it. So just for a quick recap, I'm pretty sure we did not cover this at all, actually. So we are starting at 152. Nancy's taking the stand. The previous housekeeping stuff was just about like, oh, can we show this text message? Yada yada yada. It was really minute stuff. They I think they took their lunch already. So wait, did they? No, I can't remember. Let me see what I have in my notes. I think they took their lunch already, guys. Yeah, I think they did. So, yeah, because my last video I recorded, they were just going to lunch. So they're back from lunch. They did their little bit of housekeeping. Okay, so we're good. We're good. So we're gonna wrap this up. Nancy's about to take the stand, and they're about to go in about the design of the institute, the Culinary Institute. So let's get into it.
I'm going to talk to you about your familiarity with the Oregon Culinary Institute.
Okay.
And I asked you if you could see States Exhibit 1. That's what you were saying. Yes, you can see that, okay?
Mhm.
Okay. Does that look familiar to you?
Yes, it does.
How many times would you say you visited the Oregon Culinary Institute?
Hundreds.
Have you been to most areas of the building?
I have been. And before it was OCI, it was a division of Western Culinary. So I have been there many times.
Is that where that's not the building that you went to culinary school?
No,
correct?
it's not.
Okay. But when it was Western Culinary, um, you had familiarity with it then?
Mhm.
Okay.
Pause, guys. I am going to move myself over because and this is why I think I was on the other side last time, because you can't see the map, and I'm actually gonna make myself just a tad bit smaller. You can't see the map, and you really can't see I guess you can, but I just feel like most of the good stuff is on the side where my camera is. So I'm just gonna do a quick switchy switch, move myself over there, and we're gonna get back into it. Sorry, guys. I just want you guys to have, you know, all the stuff.
And then when it became the Oregon Culinary Institute, of course, Dan worked there.
Mhm.
Okay. So you think you've been there hundreds of times?
Mhm.
Um, is there any area that you haven't ever been in? You can use the pointer there if you'd like.
All right. This area, it's not that I don't know that classroom, it's that I've really never been in there. And this little closet area in here, I've never been in there. This became a classroom later, but I've certainly been in it when it was an empty space. Other than that, I would say no.
Okay. When you would come down to the Culinary Institute,
Mhm.
well, there's been some testimony that you used to come to the restaurant quite a bit.
Mhm.
Where would you generally park and where would you go in?
You can have an hour's parking out in front, and
I know I say this every time, but the mhm are the most annoying thing ever in a courtroom. Yes or no? The court reporter cannot record mhm.
but I never parked in the student parking lot. It was too crowded. So we either parked in our parking lot or across the street in front of Starbucks in that area.
Okay.
You would go in this entrance down here,
Okay.
and then sit in the dining room.
And then when you came down to say bring Dan something or just come to visit or whatever, where would you generally park and go in then?
A lot of times I wouldn't park at all. A lot of times Dan would leave the vehicle unlocked for me. I would find where he'd parked. I'd put stuff on a seat. I'd lock his car. I would get back in and go. Other times Dan would meet me with a cup of coffee because he knows a good bribe. And he would give me the coffee. I'd give him whatever he'd gotten at the house, and I would not go in. On the
So she says Dan will, like, sometimes if she brings in something, Dan will meet her with a cup of coffee because he knows a good bribe. And that's her joke. Haha. How much do you want to bet? Like, she wouldn't do it unless he would, like, get her coffee or something. Like, I see her being that person. Like, he has to bribe her because she just doesn't do things out of the kindness of her heart. He has to say, "Oh, will you? I'll give you a coffee." Like, she's a piece of work.
occasions that I went in, I would come in the student entrance because that was the one that was unlocked.
Okay. Now you said that you visited the Culinary Institute a couple weeks prior to Dan's death, also on a Saturday, about 7:30 in the morning.
It could have been.
With cell site location information said that was 7:30. Would you agree with that?
I probably would, yeah.
Okay. You said that day you were meeting a client and you decided to stop there to use the restroom.
Right?
And you said that Dan had to let you in.
Yes.
Which door was that?
Dan would have let me in the staff entrance, which is down at the end of that strip.
That 17th
Right.
Side door.
Right?
And did you park on the street?
Yes.
And he let you in that door?
Yes.
You said you went to the restroom?
Yes.
Which restrooms did you go to?
I have no idea.
Did you go to the ones in that main hallway or did you have to go somewhere else?
Well, the restrooms are here
Right.
and here. So I went to one of them. I have no idea which restroom I went to.
When you were using the restroom, where did Dan go?
He did what he
What are the odds of that, though? Like, granted, maybe she did stop by every so often, but about 2 weeks before he's murdered, around the same time, on a weekend, you just have you need to use the restroom so badly you have to go there. Like, it just doesn't even make any sense. Of course she's casing the place. Like, although she's been there hundreds of times, she still needs to know, okay, which way am I going to come in? How am I going to do this? His class is there. Like, you still have to kind of orient yourself, you know? And so I don't blame her, or I shouldn't say it like that, but in the sense of if you're trying to commit quote unquote a perfect murder, I I understand why someone would want to case the place, but that makes it also more obvious that you are about to commit this crime or that you did commit the crime because what are you doing there at 7:30 in the morning to go to the bathroom? You have to go that bad? Didn't you go just now? Like unless you have like the runs, why do you have to go to the bathroom again so early in the morning when you just left your house? You just left. So,
does, you know. He was doing what his routine was or whatever.
What did you see him doing when you were in there?
Well, I was in the restroom. I didn't see him doing anything.
Not while you're in the restroom, when you're in the building.
I came out of the restroom. He came out of one of the classrooms. He walked me to the door, and I left. We didn't have social hour. He was working. I was borrowing the bathroom. I had things to do. He had things to do.
What were the names of the other people that were there?
I didn't see anybody there, but that didn't mean people weren't there. I would have said Yadu was there, and I probably would have said the other instructor was there.
But you didn't see or hear anyone, did you?
Not that I recall.
And that was on May 17th?
I'm not sure.
If the cell site location information put you at the school at 7:30 on May 17th, would you agree with that?
I'm not sure. And the reason why I'm not sure is I'm just going to say I'm not sure.
Okay. But you agreed it was 2 to 3 weeks.
She's wising up on us just a tad bit. I think she's wising up to realize you don't need to say everything, right? Like you don't always need to talk. And kudos. Kudos. I respect the hustle. I'm all about that. Yeah, good for her.
Or-
Something like that.
Okay. And you didn't go another time.
No.
So, being familiar with this building, you knew there were no cameras in the building, right?
You know, that just never came up in the conversation. I wouldn't have told you if there were cameras in the building or not.
You don't recall telling anybody that you knew there were no cameras in the building?
I may have said that because I may have known more 5 years ago than I know more now.
Huh?
Okay, that I know there was no cameras now because of all these things that have happened.
She was about to say, I know because of all this crap. Like, because all these, she stopped herself and she was like, all these things that have happened. And I love how the prosecution was like, huh? Like, what? Like, you knew more 5 years ago than you know now? He's like, huh? What? What does that even mean? How does that work?
I can't really tell you, although I may have known it, whether there were cameras before that. I just don't remember if I knew that before.
What about outside the building? Did you see any cameras?
Once again, I wasn't looking.
What about over at BMW? Or, yeah, what was BMW was prior to the property room? Did you see any cameras over there?
Not looking. I wasn't paying enough attention to have told you that.
Did you see any cameras when in?
She was definitely looking. She was definitely looking. There was nothing in the world that would convince me that she was not casing that place for cameras up and down. Impossible. Impossible, Nancy. Hysterical, though.
Any of the visits that you came down to the Oregon Culinary Institute?
Couldn't tell you.
When did you find out about Mark's death?
I can't tell you the exact time, but I can tell you the day. And it was Mark died on June 22nd.
What were you doing when you got that call?
Now, it took me a couple of times to watch this and notice the way her tone sort of drops in a true solemn fashion, talking about this person's death. She's genuinely sad about his death. Like, oh, when you get that kind of like, yeah, because it brings you back to a sad moment. You're like, yeah, like that, he died. Like that's genuine sadness. What you see right now is genuine sadness. And you don't see that until they bring up someone else's death besides her husband, who was murdered. Murdered. Didn't just die suddenly, murdered. And she's not as sad.
I can't even tell you if it was Susan or Holly who called me. I talked to both of them, and I don't know who told me that. But Sarah, not Susan or Holly, Sarah or Holly. Sarah said, "Can I come over?" And I said, "Sure." But whatever I was doing, it was probably wandering around in a fog anyway. So I have no idea what I was doing.
So did you find out on a phone call or?
Is it better if I sit back a little? Did I? Yes, I found out on a phone call.
What about Ed? What were you doing?
I think Cousin Janet was there when we found out about Ed. We both knew he was in bad health, but I think Cousin Janet may have gotten the text or a phone call or something from that, so we knew.
And you've seen all the video of you driving around downtown at this point, right?
Yes.
You've seen the still photographs from that.
Mm-hmm.
And you testified on direct that it looked like your van.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't quite say. You do agree that that is you at this point, right?
I do. But I would say that it took me a while to get to that stage.
Yeah. But as you sit here today, you agree that it is you driving that van that morning.
Yes, but I also think that only because of the date stamp can I tell you it was that morning.
Right. You're not challenging that. You're agreeing that that is you.
She knows good and well that she remembers driving around. How could you not? How could you not remember driving around there that morning? Like if my husband was murdered on the morning where I just passed that same block, like, that would be all up like, did I see him? Did I see anything? Did I like, I would be racking my brain trying to remember every detail about that morning if I knew I was just over there. She knows she's lying. It just gets me upset sometimes, like, my patience is worn thin. I think you guys have seen my progression of anger throughout this cross-examination just because it's like, "Nancy, you knew. You knew. Stop acting like you didn't know. You knew, and you knew you drove down there. You knew that." It's just frustrating me. It's frustrating me, but she only admits to it because of the date stamp. That's it. If that wasn't there, she would still be trying to play like, "Oh, I don't know." It's like, "Yes, you do."
We have more things to challenge than me driving around in this case.
You would agree that you're driving around and in front of the Culinary Institute at the exact time that Dan is being murdered?
No, actually, I don't agree with that. I was driving around for a full hour before Dan got murdered. I was down there before Dan ever got to school. Was driving around writing for a full hour. I was only in that vicinity for 6 minutes, and I don't know that Dan was murdered in that 6 minutes. We agree that he was murdered in that time frame, but in terms of when he arrived and shortly thereafter. But whether it's not in that 6 minutes or not, I don't know.
I'm sorry, did you just say that you were driving around writing?
Yes, that's what I was doing. Was driving around writing. I testified to that yesterday, that I would find a place to park and I'd jot down ideas.
Nothing is better than when the prosecution is just like, "Wait, what? Did you just say you were driving around writing?" Like, driving around and writing at the same time? Who does that? Like, what are you talking about, Nancy? Oh my gosh.
I thought you didn't know that you were driving.
Yesterday, what I testified for was that when I was sitting in there, I could remember being in the parking lot writing. Didn't I say that yesterday?
No, no.
Okay.
So let's go back over.
Okay, let's go back.
View. So Mrs. Brophy, don't ask questions. Mr. Overstreet, don't answer questions.
Sorry.
So yesterday, you stated that you remembered a time being in that area, and you were writing. There was a white van. There was a man going back and forth between the white van and some other location. You assumed that he was working on the van. It was distracting to you, and that you decided to leave. Do you remember that? Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay. Your attorney then asked you if that was on June 2nd.
And I said I did not know.
Right. So if you do not know, you have no memory of driving around downtown on the morning of June 2nd, how can you sit here today and say that I was driving around writing?
Boom. How can you say that if you have no memory? Right? You said that you you were in a fog. You have no memory. You just remember this man walking back and forth and then you left. Oh my god, Nancy.
Because if I was down there, that's what I was doing. And you're right. I stand corrected that I should have answered the question differently and said, I don't know. But I do know, based upon the timestamps, that I was down there an hour before Dan died. And that I was only down there for 6 minutes or less from the time that he signed into the building until you see me again leaving the area.
Right. That 6 minutes, you just happened to be in front of the Culinary Institute during that time.
No, I wasn't.
Did you see the video where you can see your van turning off of 17th onto Jefferson at 7:28 a.m.?
I did see that, but that doesn't mean I was in front of the Culinary Institute. That means I would have come up from another street to have gotten there.
But you're not seen on any other cameras until that moment.
But as you all testified, if there's a train,
Her brain is just like, and she has to come up with something. She has to make up something because this sounds absolutely ridiculous. And this is the story she has. Okay, let's see.
see when people cross Madison. So I could have been, and what I actually think I was, if this is having thought about it for a while, is in another parking lot off Madison at that point. So I can say at 7:28, I definitely turned the van and was driving there, and we all saw it. But I have no idea, and I know I wasn't parked in front of the building. So what I would have been is riding someplace else and coming around. Now I'm doing this based upon putting stuff back together, not based upon actual memory.
Right. You said you know that you wouldn't have been parked in front of the building, but how would you know that?
Because I would have gone inside. Because I would have said, "Hi, Dan, how are you?" Because when Dan came out of the building, he would have said, "Hey, Nancy, how are you? We're not foreigners. We know each other."
How do you know you didn't go in the building?
I know I didn't go in the building because I didn't kill Dan.
How do you know, Nancy, that you did not go in the building? How do you know? If you have no memory, and he's going to say this, so it's not like I'm a genius or anything. I've seen this like 25 times. So If you have no memory, how can you say that? And when he said, I'm just like, again, like if you have no memory, if you have no memory, you don't know what you did. You could have gone inside. And then how can you say you know you didn't kill Dan if you have no memory?
No, I know that for a fact.
If you have no memory, how do you know you didn't go in the building?
You know, I'm reconstructing this, but I'm reconstructing this based upon what I know in my heart. And what I know in my heart is the reason why I have no memory is because I was stunned by the fact Dan was dead. And I wouldn't have been stunned if I'd been in the building and shot him.
I didn't suggest that you did go in to shoot him. What I'm suggesting and asking
Okay.
is, did you just go in the building? And how would you know if you didn't?
I agree that, but he wasn't part of my focus that morning. My focus was on my story and getting it out and getting it done, you know. And Dan is at work. You know, you don't. Your wife doesn't drop in to see you at work just because she's driving by. You know, she assumes you're working. I assume Dan is working.
But you just did 2 weeks ago drop in on him. So how do you know you didn't do it again? You just did it 2 weeks ago. So it's not like it's completely out of the ordinary, right, Nancy? Because you just did it.
You did it 2 weeks prior.
I did it for a specific purpose, which was to go to the bathroom.
Right. So, Ms. Brophy, would you agree that it's possible that you went into the OCI on the morning of June 2nd to use
Nope.
the bathroom?
No, I wouldn't.
Impossible.
I would say it was impossible,
Even though you have no memory of it.
even though I have no memory of it.
And of course, she's looking at her attorney like, oh no. Impossible? How is that impossible? I think this this segment, like although the other parts of the cross-examination are great, this part after lunch, I guess he had his Wheaties, he had his whatever you eat for lunch out there, I don't know. I just thought of Wheaties because I think of like lumberjacks and Wheaties in the morning. I don't know what they eat for lunch in Oregon. Probably a tuna sandwich or something like I would eat for lunch. But anyway, he had his lunch and he came back ready. Okay, ready. So I think he really, I just love how he demolishes her here.
Where did you normally go to get Starbucks?
It depended on where I was going that morning. If I was going to McMinnville, there's a Starbucks as I drive down 217 that I can hop off on. If I was going to Oregon City, Oregon City, if I was going to Oregon City, what I actually did was I didn't stop for Starbucks because there was a Starbucks in the Fred Meyers where I was going. So I would have gone there. If I was at home, there's a Starbucks on Beaverton Hillsdale Highway right by Jesuit High School. There's a Starbucks on Hall where it intersects with right across from the Beaverton Mall. Those are the two I tend to go to occasionally. But if I have time and I'm going to sit there and write, then I usually go to the one at 17th and Canyon, which is just the other side.
Other side of 26.
Right. No, the other side of
Or, I'm sorry,
217.
217. That's what I meant. Other side of 217 from your house. Okay, so have you taken a look at your bank records?
I have not.
In preparation for this trial, you haven't seen your bank records?
Well, I saw them months and months ago.
Okay. And you've heard testimony that you go to Starbucks quite a bit.
I do.
I think somebody said almost $1,000 in a year or something like that.
Yeah, I was shocked by that figure too.
I think we all would be. But there's no charge for Starbucks on the morning of June 2nd.
Yes, but if you go through my bank records, you will see there's no charge for Starbucks a lot of days when I know that I had coffee. You know, if I had cash, I could have paid cash. Keep in mind that I don't have my purse with me because I'm not carrying a purse. I'm not wearing a bra, so I don't have a credit card with me. I don't have my phone with me, so I would have had cash and just given it to him.
It makes more sense that you'd have cash over a card.
It makes more sense if I don't have a bra that I don't have a card with me.
And you do agree you left your.
Oh my God, that line of it makes more sense if I don't have a bra, I don't have my card with me. It's like, what? Ma'am. Okay, also, I just want to say, why did she leave the house with nothing? You're leaving the house with no phone, no credit card, nothing. Anytime I'm leaving the house with no phone, like even if I'm leaving the house with no cash, I'm still taking my phone with me. That I think that's literally everyone. Now, granted, Nancy's from a different generation, so maybe she's not as attached to her phone. Sure, I'll give her that for the sake of this argument. But I mean, even if you're running out your like I think it's just human nature now, especially in the United States, you're grabbing your phone. That's it. It's rare you leave your phone. And if you do leave your phone, you're like, you feel naked and you go back in and get it. Like, oh, I left my phone. So suspect, it's suspect.
At home that morning.
I agree. I wasn't wearing a bra, so my phone wouldn't have been in my bra.
Right. So you're just this day is the day that you paid cash at Starbucks.
I pay cash at Starbucks a fair amount.
So in the morning, if Dan doesn't bring you coffee, it would be normal for you to get up, not fully get dressed, run to Starbucks, use cash, use a card, who cares, right? Go back home, and right. That was normal.
That would be a normal morning.
Okay.
On a day when I wasn't committed to doing something else.
Right. But on June 2nd, now you're saying that morning you got up. Let's take a step back.
Okay.
The night before, your
Okay.
testimony was that you went to sleep late or went to bed late. And when you went to bed, you went up to that attic bedroom,
Yes.
and Dan was already in bed,
Yes.
and he was asleep.
Yes.
And the reason you went to bed late was because of a leak. Is that
No.
the reason you went to bed late, or it just happened to be?
No, I frequently went to bed much later than Dan.
I see.
Dan went to bed early because he got up early.
Okay. What time did he go to bed that night?
I don't know.
Okay. What time did you go to bed?
I don't know that.
Well, you said it was late. What's your reference point?
Well, it was later than Dan. My reference point was that there was water on the floor.
Okay.
And the water on the floor, I was trying to clean it up enough that, we didn't step in it in the middle of the night and didn't make it worse.
And which sink are you talking about?
The sink in the bathroom upstairs. So my bedroom.
I love how she says we didn't step in it in the middle of the night and make it worse. Like, I know everyone has different phrases, but the first thing I would have said is like someone didn't step in it and break their neck. I think that's like a common thing of like, be careful. You don't want to slip on something and break your neck or hurt yourself. Or it's the fact that she just said and make it worse. Like she is instead of hurt ourselves or like she's just trying to, I guess, not even desensitize. I'm trying to think of the word, but she's just like she's almost softening the potential outcome, if that makes sense. She has a very interesting way of trying to manipulate the situation.
Long and narrow. And right off of my bedroom to the left is a bathroom. And as I stepped in there, we go from carpeting to sheet goods, and I could feel the water under my feet.
Okay. I think it was maybe just a little confusing. There was some testimony about a problem with the kitchen sink. But you're not talking about the kitchen sink.
No, and I thought that was not, I thought it was confusing, but I also thought at that point I was probably making a point rather than pointing to the right sink, just pointing to a sink in general.
Okay, fair enough. I just want to make sure we're talking about the right sink.
Right.
I just wasn't clear on that. So you're talking about the sink with the leak that was of concern on June 1st was in the bathroom upstairs. Okay. So you kind of clean it up. You go to bed late. It sounds like maybe you woke up at some point in the night.
I wake up every night in the middle of the night.
Do you have a specific recollection of waking up in the middle of the night?
Nope.
That night? Okay. And by that you mean like you have to use the restroom or something?
Or, I really don't sleep very well at all, and I particularly don't sleep when I'm wound up. And when I'm working on a story, I'm wound up. So I'm just not a great sleeper anymore.
So when you wake up, was Dan already up?
Yes, Dan was standing.
I could imagine her being very much wound up because she knows she's going to kill her husband in the morning. So yeah, I would be wound up too, Nancy.
Over the sink in the bathroom.
And what was he doing?
He said, why do we have all these towels in the sink? And so that was what we talked about, was the fact that I think there's a leak, and I had felt underneath, but I couldn't feel it, on the, whatever that long pipe's called, that, and he said, well, I'll get something, he said, I'll get something, or maybe I know he got something because I saw it. I'm not sure which way this is the truth here. But when I dealt with it later, there was a white bucket underneath. But the last thing I saw him.
Nothing better when she's like, this is the truth. This right here is the truth. Because everything else is a lie. This is the truth here, so hear me out.
Doing was taking the wet towels down the stairs.
That's the last time you saw him? You talked about a leak. He walked downstairs with some wet towels. You stayed in bed.
Oh, no. This is where I got up and threw on a minimum amount of clothes and ran to get coffee.
I thought your testimony was you don't remember going to get coffee.
I don't remember going to get coffee, but I do remember throwing on some clothes and leaving the house.
That wasn't your testimony yesterday.
That I didn't throw on clothes and leave the
You
house?
got dressed, but you said you didn't have any recollection of leaving to go get coffee.
Well, I think we're splitting hairs here. I don't remember getting
You
coffee.
can agree to disagree on that, but okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
Which is it, Ms. Brophy? Do you remember going to get coffee or
I do not remember getting coffee. I remember putting on clothes and heading downstairs. That's almost always a prelude to I'm going to get.
Do you remember or don't you?
And Dan was already gone by the time you got downstairs?
Oh, no. Dan would have been there for quite a bit longer. I was expecting to get coffee and be back before he was out of the shower and dressed and everything else, you know.
You see him?
No, he's in the basement. He took the wet towels down.
Okay. So he's still there, but you didn't see him.
He's still there.
So now you remember, you went downstairs, you got dressed, you went downstairs.
Okay, and I have a real problem with this, and I have to apologize to you because what I do is I reconstruct based upon what I know would have happened, not what actually happened. So allow me to apologize for the fact that I am misleading you here, and that was not intentional. What I would tell you is I don't remember running into Dan, but if I would have, I think I would have remembered it. He's downstairs, I'm assuming, dealing with the towels. I'm assuming that most of the mornings I'm right back in bed before he ever leaves.
Okay, so what time did you leave?
I have no idea.
What time did you get back?
I have no idea. What I know is the last time somebody saw me was I was in a video at 7:28.
Right. So that morning you wake up, you get dressed, you go downstairs, you leave, you don't have any recollection as to where you went,
No,
and you don't know how long you were gone.
I know from your
You
okay
have memory.
Memory, no,
You have no idea how long you were gone.
no, I have none.
You know now that your phone was not with you.
Yes,
When you got back, was Dan still there?
no, but I couldn't even tell you. Wait, once again, I'm filling in for blanks. I don't know that Dan was there or not there. What I remember is that I was sitting in bed writing when Maxine called. There's a huge little blank in there.
I know you jumped ahead with your lawyer. We're going to go slower.
Okay.
I love that. We're gonna take it down a notch. We're gonna take this nice and slow, Nancy, as slow as we want to go. We're not rushing through this. I know you want to. I know you and your attorney did, but that's not how we're gonna play it here. We're gonna go step by step.
So you assume you go get coffee,
Mm-hmm.
get home. You don't know if Dan's still there or not.
I don't remember if Dan's still there or
Don't
not.
remember. You do remember at some point you're back in bed.
Yes, because Maxine called and I was in bed writing.
And what time was that?
I don't remember that either. Maxine called, what, 9:30, 10 o'clock, somewhere in there?
Sure. You remember that?
I remember Maxine calling.
And you remember what she told you?
I do.
You remember how you responded?
Yes,
And then you remember calling Dan?
yes,
You remember trying to text Dan?
yes,
You remember him not answering or responding to your text?
I do.
You then called Maxine Borcherding back.
Right,
You remember that conversation?
right,
You got the phone with her. You called Karen Brophy.
right,
You remember that conversation?
I do.
You remember after that you got dressed,
Yes, well, yes, yes.
you got your phone,
Grabbed all my stuff.
got your stuff, went downtown, drove downtown. And when you drove downtown, did you take the normal way that you would drive when you were going to the Culinary Institute?
I'm going to say that technically, I don't really remember, but based upon habit, I would have bet money on it.
Okay. So the same road that we see you coming in on Jefferson earlier in the morning, that's the route that you most likely would have taken. Okay. So when you came in, when you get to that roundabout, did you go down Columbia and turn on 17th?
Yes, and I parked at Potluck in the Park.
Tricky here, I want to show you a map.
I feel like whenever she says something she's not supposed to, she does like a little mouth grab thing. And I don't know the area. I'm sure I could do like a whole bunch of internet sleuthing and like pull up the area and all that stuff. But the way she's like, I parked at Potluck on the Park, it's like, I don't think she intended to say that. Now, I don't know if that's like across from the Culinary Institute or if that digs her hole deeper, but I think she let something out there. Let me know if you guys notice that.
Showing you what's marked as States Exhibit 95. I talked about the roundabout.
Mhm.
When you came in here, did you come down to 17th and park on this corner right here?
I didn't park on the corner. I
Or
parked
in here.
right in there. Yes.
There's like a few spots there.
Well, it's their delivery driveway, and I don't think they think they're spots. I just created a spot.
So you didn't come in, drive around Lincoln, and come up Jefferson, right?
If we're talking about, after Maxine called, well, the video shows I'm down there another time.
Or to the point in the morning where you talked to Maxine, you talked to Ms.
Right,
Murphy.
right, and so I would have gone exactly the way you showed and parked in Potluck in the Park.
So you came down here, turned on 17th, parked somewhere in here.
Right,
Potluck in the park.
right.
Okay. And then where did you walk to from there?
Can I use the pointer?
Yes, please.
All right, so there was police tape. Sorry. There was a police tape ran from this corner right here across the street so that you could not turn either onto 17th or continue on. Right in the middle of the street was a police car. And I walked from here to the police car.
Okay. And you said you interacted with a police officer at that point?
Did.
A male police officer?
Yes?
And he directed you to go somewhere?
I said, I'm Nancy Brophy, and he said, wait here. And he said, I want you to wait over there by that building, which that building.
Her announcing herself as Nancy Brophy is the first dead giveaway that she knew. I mean, no pun intended. She knew. Cause why are you announcing yourself as Nancy Brophy? I get saying like my husband works here. Like I just want to make sure my husband's okay. My husband is Dan Brophy. Do you know anything? Like I get that. But her just saying, "Hi, I'm Nancy Brophy." Like she's already expecting for them to be like, "Oh, Miss Brophy, we have news or whatever." I don't know, but just announcing yourself like they're going to know who you are. It's like you're expected. That's a that's a telltale sign to me.
The corner of directly opposite of OCI.
Okay.
And I went stood over there, and he brought other officers.
Okay. Is that when Officer Wells came and gave you a hug?
When Officer Wells gave me a hug, we had walked from the corner. I had gone around the corner and come up, is that 17th? And so we were probably, real frankly, right about where the ab is on this sign.
Uh-huh.
And they had said, we want you to stand back over here so that you're out of the range of the camera from the press. And I said, okay, and I'm crying. And that's when Officer Wells gave me a hug.
Okay. And did she tell you anything?
She told me she would like to be married to a chef.
Okay. Did she tell you anything else?
Not that I can recall.
Okay. And did you speak with the tips volunteer before you went into the van or after?
I did not speak with them before.
Okay.
And I was in the van and they escorted her in.
Do you recall seeing Brian Wilkie and?
Yes.
Okay. Where was he?
They were across Madison, and there was Brian Wilkie, and I know Woody Bailey was with him. There were 2 or 3 other people who were kind of all standing together over here.
And you recall when the detectives walked up to you and said they wanted to speak with you in the van?
It was in that period of time.
And you remember getting in the van?
Yes.
You remember where the detectives sat?
Yes.
You remember having a conversation that was recorded with them?
Yes.
You don't necessarily remember all the conversation?
I would tell you it's spotty, but I've heard that tape enough that I can tell you what was on the tape.
Is there anything inaccurate that you were reporting to the police?
Not intentionally.
That's not what I asked.
That is not what he asked, Nancy. He didn't say intentionally or not intentionally. Did you report anything to the police? Wait, did my camera freeze? Oh, there we go. There was a little freeze, guys. I'm getting a little notification. I think this video is going to end soon, but um maybe not actually. I have a little bit. Let's see what happens. But it might have froze a little bit, but we're good.
When the police said to me, "Where were you this morning?" I told them where I was. And I told them where I was based upon the fact that when Maxine called me, that's where I was.
In fact, what you told the police were you were in bed.
Okay?
You woke up when Dan came upstairs.
Yes.
That he came upstairs to take a shower.
Yes.
That after he got out of the shower, you two discussed the leak.
I told him after the shower.
Well, maybe, I don't know that you specified exactly when, but.
Well, we're on veracity here, so we need to be accurate.
Well, you tell me.
I don't think I told him it was after the shower.
Okay. Was it before?
I did. I think my memory is that I don't remember if he'd taken a shower or not. That's why I was surprised you said that.
Okay, but you told the police that.
You could have been.
Well, you said you heard the tape.
I've heard the tape.
Okay. You told them that you took a shower. Sorry, that Mr. Brophy took a shower.
I think I told him he came upstairs to take a shower. I don't think I told him he took a shower.
You said that after the shower he got dressed and left. Do you remember that?
No. But I may have said it.
And you said that he left at 7:05 to 7:10ish. Remember that?
Yes, but that was based upon when he always left.
Okay. But you just testified to something completely different.
Here's the thing is that, no, I'm still on the same thing. I testified to the fact that I was trying to help the police so that they had an idea of what Dan did in the morning. I didn't think this whole thing had a damn thing to do with me. I thought it had to do with what was Dan doing? What can you do? What can you tell us to help us so we know what his routine is?
So was what you told the police inaccurate?
It could have been, but at that point I was screaming in my brain, Dan is dead, Dan is dead. And if I was inaccurate, it was not to mislead them.
Do you remember going into quite a bit of detail with the detectives, even regarding Dan's accident the prior week when he cut his hand?
I could have, yes.
Heard that on the tape, though?
Mm-hmm.
You've seen the video, heard the testimony. You would agree that the critical moments that you've been asked about, your responses have been you don't remember.
Critical moments that I have been asked about, my response, I don't remember, is the most accurate thing I can tell you.
Right, but at the critical moments that you were there, in the area,
literally goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, you would be racking your brain for, like, anything, and it's, like, the times that it's like, "Do you know what happened when your husband was murdered?" You're like, "Nope. No memory at all." It's like, that's not suspicious.
At the same time that someone happens to be shooting your husband within a 6-minute window with the exact type of gun that you own and is now mysteriously missing.
That's your version of what happened. That is not my version. The only thing I know for sure is I did not kill Dan.
No, that's not his version of what happened. That is what happened. That he didn't say you did it. He's saying all of these circumstances that fit into the puzzle pieces looks like you, ma'am. Looks like you. You're in the area at this. Gotta hit my elbow. You hit on the funny bone too. You you're in the area. The same gun that was used to kill him that you owned can't be found. The sliding belt cannot be found. That's not suspicious at all. Piece of work.
And I have no problem with that. I know I didn't kill Dan with the gun that was put together, the gun that wasn't put together, or the slide that we can't find. But, you know, when your husband dies, everything around you grinds to a halt. And what I told the police.
I even said this on the YouTube comments. She constantly refers to Dan as dying instead of being murdered. Like, if my husband was murdered, I am going to say he was murdered. He didn't die. Yes, he did die, but he didn't just die. Die, if you just say like, "Oh, my husband passed away," you assume it was like an illness or something, or he could have been a sudden illness, but still like some type of illness. If someone's husband is murdered or killed, it's like, "Yeah, my husband was killed last year, actually. He was murdered." You know? Maybe if you didn't wanna get someone too emotional, like, "Yes, my husband passed away last year." But in the sense of this, no, ma'am. You should be saying, "My husband was murdered. I want this to be known it was murdered, and I wanna find his murderer." But that's not the case, because she is the murderer.
Said, this is a death notification. But it wasn't a death notification. It was an in-depth interview, as seen by the fact you're bringing up every moment of it as we're coming back. And at death notification, they would have said, we can see you're upset. Let us schedule an appointment. Let us come back and see you this afternoon. Let us do something different. Instead, they hammered away at me with questions. Hammer, hammer, hammer. And I can tell you this, I tried to help them the absolute best I could. I tried to give them what I knew was his routine. I tried to help them in any way I could. And the fact that you have managed to construct a case against me out of that is you've constructed a case. But I think your case is held together with, real frankly, Band-Aids. You know,
Anything else you want to add to
no, I think I'm done. Probably more than I want to be.
Anything else you wanna add to that? Nope. No, I think I'm done. Probably more than I wanna be.
that? Isn't it possible, with your memory problems of the morning, that you actually went into the building and shot your husband and you just don't remember?
No, it is not. No, it is not. Because the one thing I knew I had a strong thing is the last time I saw Dan. I see Dan every day. I talk to him every day. This is not a man I would have shot because I had a memory issue. It seems to me like if I had shot him, I would know every detail. You know, I could have told you all sorts of things that was true. I did not shoot my husband, and I don't know even how to defend myself against the truth, you know.
Let that marinate, guys. I don't know how to defend myself from the truth. It doesn't get any more Freudian slip than that. She said, if I did murder him, I could probably tell you a bunch of stuff that was true. And quite frankly, I think your case is held together with band-aids, quite frankly. I don't even know how to defend myself from the truth. Mm, that that is such a deep statement. How do you defend yourself from the truth? How do you, Nancy?
We've talked a lot about Dan. Talked about the devastation to his family,
Yes?
to the community. And you've seen the devastation in person, right? Multiple times, over and over. All the people reaching out to you, the memorials, and the testimony in court.
Yes.
You would agree that up until the time that you took the stand, you didn't really show a lot of emotion in this trial.
No, I wouldn't agree with that at all. the fact I didn't cry doesn't mean that I didn't show emotion or that I didn't have emotion. It's mean I didn't do the overt thing. What I would tell you is it wouldn't have mattered if I'd cried or not, because if I had cried, you would be sitting here saying to me, do you agree that you were overly dramatic? So I don't think there's a win-win in this conversation for me.
But you chose to take the stand.
I chose to take the stand,
Explain your side of the story.
tell my side of the story, which I might point out I have been absolutely quiet about from the day Dan died to now. I have not had press interviews. I have not done any of the things that where I could have told my story early.
Okay. When I talk about emotion or lack thereof while you're sitting over there at council table listening to testimony, you agree that you actually laughed on quite a few occasions. Is that right?
The fact that when I think about Dan, it still gives me joy. I do laugh. I love people who come up and say to me, and I've had several people who've said this in the last 4 years, Dan was my teacher. I loved him. And I said, tell me stories about him, because that gives me joy. You know, yes, I find that, you know, am I brokenhearted? I'm brokenhearted. Am I delighted to hear stories from people?
I love how she turns on the waterworks immediately after prosecution brings up that she has not been emotional. Like, she's like, "Oh, you you ain't seen nothing yet. Watch it."
Who loved him as much as I did? Yeah, I am.
Hearing those stories make you emotional as well.
Talking about Dan, period, makes me emotional. But a lot of the people who came up and cried, well, they weren't crying for Dan, they were crying for themselves. I had a horrible experience happen to me. I'm crying, and I am empathetic to that. But when Karen Brophy teared up, my heart broke, because I knew she loved him as much as I did. And I knew that she was crying for Dan, not for some other reason.
What about the student?
Pause on that. To say that people aren't crying for Dan, they're crying for themselves is sick. First of all, for you to even assume that you know why someone else is emotional or crying or displaying emotion, that's crazy. But then on top of that, to say, oh no, I know they weren't crying for Dan. It's like, how do you know? He was their teacher. You just said how people said that he was so impactful in their lives, and he loved, his students, and his students loved him. So how do you know? Like, God forbid, if I lost a teacher, like, that I genuinely liked, and if I cried, why would I be crying for me? I'm crying because it's sad they died. I'm crying for them, the loss of them. Ugh.
That knew Dan and loved him.
The students that knew Dan and loved him didn't testify earlier. Who testified a lot earlier was the instructor, 2 or 3 of the people who had been in the pastry class. And I am grateful to them for the fact they did what they could do. Do not misunderstand me. But I don't think it changed their life. They went back to school the next weekend. They graduated from the program. They weren't testifying they had to have counseling as a result of this. I'm saying the people whose heart were broken, the people who missed Dan and loved him the most, the people who loved him the most, I cry with them, because we know.
Sorry, did you just testify and say that the person who literally tried to save his life was not negatively affected by this?
No, I said she went on with her life. That she didn't. I did not say that. She had a horrible experience. I said I was empathetic to that experience. But I also know that she wasn't crying that day in court because of that. She was crying because she had had a terrible experience, and it affected her with bad memories. But it
How do you know, Nancy? How do you know? Finding someone dead? I hope I never have to experience that, but I would imagine that could affect you for the rest of your life. How do you know? It's so upset. Like, it's so. You just see how cold hearted she is in this exact moment talking about this. And she's crying for herself. She's not crying for Dan. She's not crying for anyone else. She's crying that she is in this situation. That's why. That is bringing out the tears. Oh my God.
not stop her life. Her life went on. Her life. She went back to school. She graduated with the program. You know, it stopped my life. It stopped the Brophy's life. There were students he had whose life had stopped, and coworkers he had who were truly, truly brokenhearted.
Ms. Brophy, did you listen to the testimony of Clarinda Perez?
I did. And I've heard it 3 times now. The first time she told me, I cried, because she told me in person. Every time she's been on the stand, Clarinda Perez has sobbed and sobbed. And I am sympathetic every time she does it. I know she went through a terrible experience. But she's not crying for Dan. She's crying for the
The way she says, yeah, and I've heard it 3 times now. It's like, yeah, I'm sick of hearing it. The first time I cried. The second time she cried. And the third time, it's like, shut up, Nancy. What are you talking about? If you could be sympathetic to anyone in this case, be sympathetic to the woman that tried to save your husband. Don't try to talk about her like she's some drama queen over here. Like, oh yeah, she just keeps turning on those waterworks. It's like, what are you talking about?
experience she had.
You mentioned that. I'm asking about your feelings.
Okay, let me ask the question again, please.
You listened to Clorinda Perez testify about her experience.
Right?
She saw Dan on the ground. She knew CPR. She took it upon herself to try to save his life
Yes.
and failed.
Yes.
She felt that.
Yes.
You saw her tell that story on the stand.
Mm-hmm.
It was absolutely devastated about that experience.
No, I disagree with you entirely on that. I think she had a terrible experience. I think that it was a bone jarring experience for her. I think she did everything she could, and she was proud of the fact. And I was proud for her that she did everything she could. But when she's crying 5 years after the fact because it was a terrible experience, I think she's crying for the fact she had a horrible experience, not for the fact that Dan Brophy, a man she barely knew, died.
Keep mentioning that. We're going to play what's marked as State's Exhibit 116. Yes. I'll play just real briefly and have you identify the voice.
So far, they haven't covered anything.
Who does that sound like?
Well, I'm also looking where it says call to Sarah Gitchell, so I'm assuming that's Sarah Gitchell.
Who's the voice that you hear?
Yes, that's my voice.
That's your voice?
Yes.
And this is a phone call that you made to Sarah Gitchell?
Could be, yes. That's what it says.
Okay. Why don't we go ahead and go back to the beginning? Play that.
So far, they haven't covered anything that we didn't know. I mean, they had all these little girls who cried today, you know, and I've seen all these little girls. Well, I've seen particularly the Spanish girl cry 3 times now. So, you know, she cries off cue.
Didn't I just say essentially that?
That's your response after hearing these people testify to their experience.
And she doesn't back down. In no way is she backing down to say, you know what? That does sound a little bit harsh. No, she's like, didn't I just say that? Like she keeps crying. Like, what is her problem? It's like, what is wrong? This part did not do her any justice.
That's what you thought about that?
I thought it was interesting that Clorinda Perez, when she told me, did not cry. When she's on the stand, she cries and she sobs and she carries on. I think she has. I think she had a terrible, terrible experience. That I totally, totally agree with, and I'm sympathetic to that. But I also think she can cry on cue when she gets on stand, because she didn't cry when she told me. She told me, and I cried. You know, when we went to an event, that she came up and said, "I am the person who did CPR," and I immediately burst into tears. You know, when she told me the story, and I told her how wonderful I thought she was. You know, that she had done that. But
You seem to be a couple steps ahead of me throughout this.
Sorry.
You're expecting this?
I don't know if expecting that is what I would say, but I'm sorry. I'll try and be quieter.
When you keep saying Clorinda Perez over and over and you keep mentioning her name, in this audio, you don't actually say Clorinda Perez.
Okay.
Is she the one you're referring to when you say the Spanish girl?
I think she is. I don't think the others were Spanish, but they could have been.
Okay. And did you see Clorinda Perez at the farmyard? I'm sorry about the name, but the farmyard memorial in August?
That's where she told me.
Okay. Isn't it true that when she came up to you and tried to talk to you, you actually ignored her?
No, it's not.
Dr. Warford testified and called you a problem solver. Would you agree with that?
I could totally see Nancy trying to ignore her. She wants nothing to do with this lady. And it's just sickening how she talks about, like, oh, she didn't cry when she told me the story. Maybe she doesn't. You're the wife. If I'm encountering the wife of the person, I'm going to try to be strong and just tell them what they need to know. I'm not going to put on the waterworks. But then it became a point when she realized that you don't care. And she's like, why am I holding back? Oh my God, Nancy.
I think on my feet, yes.
It's true. You're not a lawyer, right?
No,
You got a lot of lawyers in your family,
true.
including some of them that practice criminal defense.
Yes.
Ms. Brophy, do you know where I can go in the metro area to rent night vision goggles?
I have no idea.
You know if there's a place I can go where I can just try them out, handle them?
I have no idea.
But you bought a pair.
I had a person who worked for me who took a loan from me, and that was what he used for collateral. He paid the loan back. He got the night vision goggles back.
Sorry, the line of questioning with your lawyer was things that you had purchased in order to further your writing.
It could have. Yes, I can see that. But in a way, I purchased it. If he had not come back and reclaimed it, they would have been mine.
We heard from a few of your writer friends that are quite successful. Lots of published books and make a decent living. That's not true for you, though, right?
No, I started. Most of those people started.
I love the way he phrases that question. Like, you have a lot of friends that are successful. That's not true for you, right? And it's like, shade. The shade is funny.
Being published about 5 years earlier than I did, and I have not been successful. I have sold books, but I have not sold enough books to make me break out and have people say, hey, this is an author I remember. But considering that with the advent of Amazon, that 10,000 books get published every month, it's now harder to do that than it's been in the past.
Right. And you're actually a self-published author,
I am.
right? Have you ever been published besides yourself?
Yes, I have.
What book was that?
It was a book called Sex in the Office. It was published by Black Lace Publishing, and it was part of an anthology.
When was that?
Uh, 2005, maybe 2006, somewhere in there.
You know, I don't think I mentioned this previously, but I genuinely think, like, because like, her books were so sexually driven, and I think she just wanted, like, this hot, like, passionate, like, sex life, and that wasn't Dan. Like, Dan was just like, "I want a garden, I wanna hang out, let's just be an old couple," and listen, I shouldn't even say it like that because old couples clearly get it on, according to Nancy, but she wanted this, like, glamorous, like, sexy life, and that was not Dan. So it's like, I think she lived through her books, and it shows.
Not much success after that.
I would say publishing changed, and I wouldn't say, I would say it differently. I would say I didn't get into romance writers with the idea that of being published. That was never my goal. My goal was to write because I like to write. Friends like Salute said, no, you need to write toward getting published. And we were friends long enough that I wrote toward getting published.
When did you start writing?
I can't remember a time I haven't written.
Whole life?
Whole life.
And when we talk about being published, there's been some questions to you about this Witches book or Witches trilogy that you wrote in this email that you got. That was from a publisher?
That was from an agent.
An agent. So not a publisher.
That's right.
It was an agent asking to see more of the writing so they could determine whether they were going to be interested in purchasing it, correct?
That's true.
Nobody
No. They weren't. No. An agent acts as your go-between. A lot of editors won't look at your work without an agent.
So nobody was actually telling you they were buying that book?
Nobody was telling me that, no.
How many people do you think you sent that manuscript to?
I didn't send the manuscript to many people. Queried a lot of people.
You didn't send that manuscript to...
At best, I sent a chapter. Editors,
speeding
agents
up
don't
this
want to
portion.
have you send their manuscript unrequested. You send a little bit of the writing, they look at it and say, yes, we're interested in this story. No, we're not.
I'm not an author, so I don't necessarily... I might be using the wrong terminology, so feel free to correct me. You sent a sample, a piece
Right.
of the story to how many people do you think?
Oh, I probably sent it out to 10 to 20.
You got rejected from all of them.
Yes,
You got this one email about somebody who may be interested.
right?
You didn't respond to that email.
Yes, I did.
Where's that?
I sent them the manuscript.
Where's that?
What do you mean, where is it? It went magically by email to her. A few months later, if you look down the road, you'll see that she sent me a rejection letter. And I would guess, based upon what I know about this, that it would take her 90 days to do that.
You testified yesterday that you didn't know anything about guns. So you had to do some research.
That's true.
And that began in 2017?
2017.
Slowing it back
That
down a
began
little.
with this particular story in 2017.
You actually know quite a bit about guns before that, right?
I wrote heroes that operated with guns, but where I would get into trouble because I didn't write in depth about guns. Like, for example, in 2015, I did a lot of research on dirty bombs and on plastic explosives like C4. And so you research what you need. I hadn't really needed, I could pass guns off by throwing out equipment stuff. I could talk about flashbangs and I could talk about this. So it sounded like my guys were in that. You know, romance writers don't need a technical description. I'm not Tom Clancy. What they need is enough believable things that they can get by. Now, when you're writing a book about guns and putting it together, you need information about guns. But for the most part, and in that book, I needed information about how C4 worked and what a string of pearls were and things like that. I needed information. I've researched Navy SEALs because several of my heroes were leaving the military and they had been Navy SEALs. You know?
But when you say things to the police like, oh, the shooter thingy, I mean, you have more knowledge than that.
I have more knowledge than that, but the shooter thingy is when your husband has just died and your words are leaving you. I would have said
The shooter thingy, you can say gun. Like, come on.
thingy when I was stressed. You know, I talk to myself in that video. I say, Nancy, this. I don't talk to myself in third person. I haven't gone over the bend that far. And yet I listen to myself in that thing and I think, whoa, I was stressed as hell that I'm talking to myself in third person.
2015, you wrote and self-published a book called The Wrong Husband, correct?
I did.
On page 231 of that book, it says, Austin counted to 25, slid out from his hiding place and fired 6 shots into the body on the bed. At the 7th squeeze of the trigger, the gun clicked. No more bullets.
Okay.
That sound right?
Yes.
You wrote that?
Yes.
In 2017, you wrote and self-published a book called The Wrong Seal.
Yes.
On page 178 of that book, it says, slowly she eased the gun out of her pocket and propped the barrel on the branch. Each shot had to count. Does that sound right?
That sounds right.
Something you wrote?
Yes, but you notice none of that required any in-depth knowledge.
In January 2015, you self-published a book called Hell on the Heart.
I did.
On page 4064, it says, the gun fired. The force of the projectile entering her body rocketed her backward. Call that?
I'm pretty sure there was not 4,000 words in that, 4,000
Sorry,
pages
maybe,
in that book.
I'm sorry. I might have the page numbers wrong. I'm sure you're right. I don't think you wrote that lengthy of a book. Also in that book, you wrote, instead, a darkened window descended and the barrel of a gun sparkled in the sunlight and the shot was loud. Does that sound right?
Could be.
Later on in that book, you actually talk about a Glock specifically. You say, Dare emerged, his Glock in his hands, but pointed toward the ground. Does that sound right?
Yes. And as long as we're on that, you ask or somebody
Let me ask
asked.
the question.
Sorry.
Also in that book, you talk about a Glock again. Instinctively, John counted each shot while pulling his Glock free of his shoulder holster. Okay. You wrote all that. Okay. As a writer, is it true that you spend a lot of time thinking about murder?
Oh, yeah. When you're romantic suspense, somebody's dying.
You also consequently
Somebody's dying, okay? Just so you know, somebody's dying, according to Nancy, whether you like it or not. Romantic suspense, she's living through her books.
think about police procedure quite a bit. Is that right?
Yes and no. I mean, I wrote that, and I know what you're quoting me on, but I think less about police procedure and more about because, with the exception of only one book, do I really talk about police. Most of my stories, real frankly, are about the same thing. But police procedure is not. I don't go through it step by step. The only book that I have about cops is The Wrong Cop.
Right. I wasn't necessarily talking about what you were writing about. Talking about
Well,
your thoughts.
I know I don't think a ton about police procedure. For one thing, I would have known more if I was paying attention in this case. This case has taught me a lot that I will never be able to use again. But it's taught me a lot about police procedure I had no idea about.
I love how she says she'll never be able to use it again. Almost like she knows she's going to be found guilty. Because essentially, hypothetically, if she thought she was truly innocent and would be found not guilty, why would she stop writing if it was her passion? If anything, this experience has taught her a lot, so she could probably write more and use more from this. Just thought that was interesting. She has so many Freudian slips.
You've obtained books regarding police procedure. Is that right?
I have research books on any number of things, but police procedure I don't really think would be the thing. I've attended classes where they talked about police procedure.
Right. You took that class with Miss Smith out in Washington County.
They didn't talk about police procedure then. I mean, there may have been some references to it, but they talked about what does the sheriff's county do and what does each department do and how are they working within the community. It was an interesting class. It taught me a lot of things, but it was for the benefit of the Washington County public relations, that shows we are working in a different way than you think we're working. And it was very effective because I was dazzled by some of the things that they said.
And as a romance writer and thinking about murder and police procedure, you also consider what motives people might have. Is that correct?
Yes, because I don't think people murder willy-nilly unless you're a professional hitman. I think lots of people who say things like, I would never murder anybody. And I say, it's between you and your child. It's him or it's your child. What would you do? And I would bet money that that's all of a sudden their ideas of I would never murder anybody might radically change.
Would you agree that
Mm. That's all I got to say on that is anybody will murder anybody. And I don't disagree with her on that. Mm.
financial reasons is a big reason people might murder?
Yes, but I don't ever write about that. I mean, I think financial is a big reason.
Yeah. And do you agree that divorce is expensive and may not result in you getting anything or much?
Divorce is expensive. I don't think that is a mystery to anybody here. But I don't think that it might result in you not getting anything. Real frankly, I suspect that you will get half of what you have.
Sure. And as a romance writer and thinking about these things, you know that people might consider using guns or knives or poison to commit a murder. Is that right?
Weapons, yeah.
And you also would, if somebody were to ask you, you advise against them of considering a hitman because you're bringing somebody else into your
How many Lifetime stories have we seen where the girl hires a hitman to kill her husband, and lo and behold, the hitman turns out to be an FBI agent? Woohoo! I think that's a stomped-on theme.
right?
These are all the ways that she ruled out killing Dan. It's yeah, can't do a hitman. And she clearly shows her disdain for hitmen. So yeah.
Find it easier to wish people dead instead of actually killing them, correct?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's so much easier to say, than to actually do anything, because by the time you're over being annoyed at them, you're over being thinking they, need to have bodily harm.
My last question to you, Ms. Brophy, is if there's one thing that you know about murder, is it that anyone is capable of doing it?
I absolutely believe that. And I believe that because, once again, if it's your child or the person in front of you, 10 to 1, you will find yourself capable of murder. I think most people don't murder for flimsy reasons. I think people get pushed into a corner where they have no other options. I think people murder because they're protecting somebody they love. I think people murder, well, there's some mercy killings perhaps where people murder to save the person they love pain, but I think that's rare. I think people murder in rage. I don't think people murder because they say, well, we'll just sneak down and do this quickly. I think if you're going to murder somebody, 10 to 1, that person knows that you are not happy with them. I don't think that should come as a mystery, to anybody. I don't think people murder willy-nilly out of the, just because, yeah, financial reason is a big reason. But going back to my case, there's not enough financial reason there to make it. I do better with Dan alive financially than I do with Dan dead. There's no financial gain here. We had solved our problem. I turned the book into an editor and I said, well, they had a problem here in October of 2017, but they had solved it. But then she murdered him in 2018 when they'd solved their financial problem. Where is the motivation, I would ask you? An editor would laugh and say, I think you need to work harder on this story. You have kind of a big hole in it. I think people murder out of anger more than anything else.
I'm going to ask everyone to stop there. It's now noon. We'll take our lunch break and we'll be back at 1:30.
Okay, so they're going to lunch now. That's what it was. But either way, morning session is over. No further questions from the defense. And I think the last question asked of her in her response was so telling. Anyone can murder, and people don't murder willy-nilly. Now, if you guys remember, if you guys followed the trial, her whole defense was that some like random homeless person came in and like murdered Dan just randomly. And she just went on a whole rant about how that just like doesn't happen. People just don't murder willy-nilly. Um One for the books, guys. I don't know if I missed the part, but there is a part when she oh. Her attorney. That's what it is. There's a part when her attorney asks her, I think it's the last question her attorney asks her, "Did you kill Dan?" And then she goes, "No, I did not." And it's like anytime she's asked if she killed Dan, she closes her eyes. It's like, what is that about? You know? It's so odd. Um, but no, that sort of wraps up Nancy's cross-examination. I thought about doing maybe the closing arguments because I think this defense attorney does an excellent job on this case in the closing arguments. I think he does a really good job. But I feel like being that she took the stand, it already kind of took us through a lot of the facts of the case. So I don't know. I'll give it some thought. But I really do appreciate you guys hanging out with me for this hour as we went through the final part of Nancy Brophy's cross-examination. We did it, guys. Um, I will hopefully have something new and exciting for you guys next week. But in the meantime, keep yourselves out of trouble, keep yourselves safe, and thank you so much for joining. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.